What's up, Aventis fam? Welcome to the podcast series Aventis Knows. You are now listening to the 5th episode of this podcast, Aventis Knows Season 4. This show is brought to you by Aventis Learning Group, and I'm your host, Jing Han. And if you are an individual who's trying to find your way around the corporate ocean or trying to hashtag up your game with your career, this is where you should be. In today's episode, we will be discussing the topic of how do we ace emotional intelligence interviews. I believe you'll be hard-pressed to find anyone who would say they love attending interviews. And if you're one of those rare individuals who doesn't get nervous in a job interview, kudos to you. But for the rest of the population, no matter who you are or how experienced you might be, interviews tend to send a few nerves rumbling. So although I would love to tell you to not let interview nerves get the best of you, I think we all understand that the anxiety before and during an interview can be incredibly difficult to control, and it has the power to totally derail your performance. And since many employers know whether they want to hire you within the first 90 seconds, it is critically important to learn to control the interview nerves so that the real amazing you can shine through from the start to finish. Let's bring in our speaker, Rahul Shah, to enlighten us more on this topic. Hi Rahul, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here.
So Rahul, can you share with us a bit about what you do?
Well, I've been a communications trainer for the last 15 years, focusing mostly around Australasia. So I've trained over 60,000 participants in the course of my career. And my area of specialty and focus has been communications all along. So this includes persuasion, influence, sales, negotiations, relationships, conversations, and interview skills as well, which is, I guess, what we're discussing today.
Okay, thank you for sharing. So our topic today is how do we ace emotional intelligence interviews? Can you share with us the concept behind what exactly is meant by emotional intelligence interviews or emotional intelligence questions?
Okay, so that's a very good question on its own, because before we answer that question, you first have to understand what emotional intelligence is, right? So emotional intelligence is basically, in very simplified terms, your ability to perceive and respond to your own and other people's emotions. Now, what happens is our ability to respond to our own emotions or other people's emotions, especially in the workplace setting, is critical in being able to manage stress, manage situations, manage people, manage relationships. So when it comes to emotional intelligence questions, it is the human resources or the HR or recruiters' efforts in trying to determine our ability to perceive, use, respond to, and understand emotions and how to work with them, so that when they're hiring us or when they're selecting the best candidate, they're able to select a best candidate while getting to know the real person and not just the persona that they bring to the interview room most of the time. Because we all know, right, when we go for interviews, sometimes we put on this additional persona and we're not often ourselves. So the EI questions help them to cut through that and get to know the real us. Right. So I think that's the main purpose why recruiters tend to ask EI questions.
And then before we go any further, I think we need to know one very important question. So are organizations actually asking emotional intelligence questions?
I think smart organizations are. Right? I think most organizations today do see the worth of asking good EI questions. Depending on what they need and what they're looking for within candidates, they're going to ask certain type of questions. Obviously, it has also become a norm where I think candidates are put through multiple rounds of interviews. Right, this includes maybe 2 oral interviews, 1 written, essay that they have to submit, and somewhere within this, there is a component of EI hidden in it, right? Along with the other intelligence quotients, but I think EI is definitely a major factor in a lot of, at least the bigger organizations today. Yeah.
So why are recruiters or hiring managers or even businesses looking for individuals with high EQ levels?
I guess because the world has come to realize that behavior is driven by emotions. So if you want someone to be successful in the workplace, if you want a candidate who's driven, who's motivated, who can work as a team within teams, who can fit into the organization's culture and system and environment. You need someone who has got a good AI, right? You do not want someone who's coming in and is ill-tempered, who is having disputes with the colleagues all the time, who is being snappy with customers, So I think that creates a lot of problems down the road. But someone who is able to manage and be aware and sensitive to their own and other people's emotions, it does not only save the organization a lot of trouble down the line, but it also adds as an asset, it adds as a leverage for them to have people who are able to go out there and get the work done with positive energy, right? Which I think is very critical. It's very important.
Okay, so now we know what it is and why are they asking. Can you now share with us the different types of emotional intelligence questions that we might come across?
Sure. So I think depending on the situation and the organization and kind of role that we are going to be interviewing for, there can be many different kind of questions that we ask. There are some favored ones from interviewers, obviously. So the most easy ones are personal questions, things like tell us about a time that you failed, for example, right? Or another question that they often ask, which can be personal, is tell us about your favorite color, right? So they seem to be seemingly ordinary questions, harmless questions, but they are asked to get a sense of a person's ability to respond to questions with initiative, with depth, with substance, with expansion. So let's say, for example, if someone were to ask me, what's your favorite color? And I just say, oh, my favorite color is blue, and I stop there. I think that also gives an indication to the interviewer that I don't really have a deeper thought process behind what I'm trying to say. But let's say, for example, if I have studied the organization, I know that the organization's colors, for example, are orange. And I would say that, ironically, my favorite color is also orange, right? And the reason why I like the color orange is because it's energetic, it's dynamic, and it charges you up for the day. Every time you look at the color orange, it makes you feel more awake, more alert, and it's youthful. So there's a lot of positivity in it, there's a lot of drive in it. So I'm able to link my favorite color to the organization's colors, and not only that, probably even link it back to the organization's philosophies, organization's values, which then becomes important. So I'm able to demonstrate that I'm aware of where the interviewer is, what the organization is about, and I'm able to bridge my favorite color with what I'm here to do today. So it shows a certain thought process. I don't have, this is where a lot of times participants are going to ask, so does that mean I have to make it up, or do I have to lie? That is an absolute no, right? It's something that I'll never ever suggest. But I think most of us have more than one favorite color. The reality is, I think it's quite hard to say that this is my absolute favorite, or even if we do have an absolute favorite, there are other colors that I like as well. So, in an interview, you can always do that. You can always say that, well, I do have a couple of favorite colors. I've got white, I've got blue, and so surprisingly, I've got orange as well. So, it's about being authentic, but at the same time, trying to find something that you can bridge back or link back to what the organization stands for. And that makes for purposeful, constructive interview responses. Another one, I think, besides personal questions, would be hypothetical questions. These are the what if kind of a question, right? What if you are put in a difficult spot or a position and you have to make some tough decisions? How would you approach that decision-making process, for example? So these are the what if kind of questions. The hypothetical questions. What they're trying to look at with the what if kind of questions essentially is your ability to pre-plan, to design a strategy, to design roadmaps, to design approaches, to validate and justify, or to provide sound reasoning. Right? So often the answer itself is not important. You can say whatever you want, right? So what if you were given a superpower for the day? You can say, oh, I would like to fly. So that's not important. You can say anything you want, right? But the magic lies in why do you want to fly? I think that's what they're looking for. So, I would like to fly because that gives me a greater sense of mobility. It helps me to get to places faster, which helps me to become more efficient. And if you know that the organization is looking for efficiency, then that's the point that you want to expound on, right? So the reasoning, the justifications, the underlying thought process is more important in hypothetical kind of a scenario or a question basis. Another question is scenario-based questions. Right? Scenario-based questions are again a favorite question in an organization. So, I think there's this very popular one that says that assume that you are a salesperson, all right, and you are asked to increase the sales. Assume that you're a product manager and you're asked to increase the sales of your toothpaste product. How would you increase the sales, right? So I think that's the kind of question where they want to see your business acumen. They want to see how you're able to relate to people, relate to real life examples, relate to the environment that you're functioning in. So it's a relatability aspect that they're looking at, and also the stress aspect. Are you able to manage stress? Because usually these kind of questions is not something you're going to be prepared for, right? It's something that you're going to be saying, this has taken me off. This has taken me by surprise. So these are the kind of questions that they want to test your composure, they want to test your thinking skills. Under pressure, are you able to think well? So these are scenario-based questions. Another popular question was, you're put in a separate room. In another room, a light bulb was turned on. How do you tell which light bulb was turned on after you go into that room, right? Because you were not in that room. So how do you know which light bulb was turned on? So these are the kind of questions that they like to ask, critical thinking skills that come along with your ability to link them to emotional awareness or your own emotional awareness in that particular moment. So there are various different kinds of questions that they can ask. The underlying important thing is not so much about the type of questions, but I always emphasize on two things: why they're asking the question and what are they looking for in your response. So in summary, what they're looking for is your reasoning, your ability to be aware of your own emotions, and what the interviewer is asking for is to be able to respond with managing your emotion in that moment, and also respond to what the interviewer is demanding or asking of you. So I think these three things are extremely important in any EI questions. All right. So when you are responding, go deeper, take initiative, provide elaborations, expound, right, and do not give superficial or dishonest answers and responses. I think that was very, very essential in this.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Because usually when we come across these type of questions, we don't really associate it to emotional intelligence questions. We just treat it to normal questions.
Sure.
So that's very interesting. Then when in cases where there is no emotional intelligence type of question asked during an interview, how do we as an interviewee show off or demonstrate our emotional intelligence throughout the interview?
I think one of the biggest, one of the easiest things to demonstrate in terms of emotional intelligence is empathy, right? So simple things like nodding, right? Showing appreciation for the interviewer for asking questions. Thank you. Excuse me. Sorry, give me a moment. It goes to show awareness. Having a smile on your face at all times, leaning forward. Demonstrative active listening, which is basically your ability to clarify, confirm, consult when necessary. The tone of your voice, where it is more consultative, it is more polite, it is composed. That is all very important in demonstrating good EI or EQ during your interview process. Right? I think one of the things that interviewers don't want to see is somebody who is very unaware of themselves, fidgeting, a lot of self-touch, unnecessary body movements, lack of awareness about their voice trailing off. These are things that I think interviewers are not going to be very fond of. So the contrary to that, the opposite of that, someone who's confident, someone who's forthcoming, somebody who's leaning forward, somebody who's proactive. These are somebody who shows appreciation and acknowledgement towards the interviewer, somebody who smiles. These are good ways of showing good UI. So demonstrating EI throughout the interview in a very subtle manner. This leaves a good impression on the interviewer, and even maybe without their awareness, they are taken in by your good EI at the end of the day. Right? So we don't have to wait for questions to be asked before we are able to demonstrate EI. It's something that we should seek to demonstrate from the moment we step into the interview room. And that's of course in terms of body language and gestures and all that. In terms of responses, find any opportunity to demonstrate points of, for example, they will ask you a simple question. I notice you have been away from work for the last 6 months. You have not been able to get to work in the last 6 months. Why has there been this gap in your career at this point in time? So I think it's now somebody may have been let off because of COVID, and they're now going back into a job market. They've been struggling to find it. So they can go two ways. A response can go into something that's self-pity, self-sympathy, complaint, and it's very tempting, right? Someone says, yeah, it was just a COVID situation, I got retrenched, and it was so difficult for me to find a new job, and I've been trying and trying, but it's been such a struggle. Nobody has been even responding back. This is the first opportunity I've gotten, and I'm very grateful for it. So it goes, that person is obviously trying to make the company feel good for giving them a shot, but like for 2 minutes before that, you have been doing nothing but complaining, right? So that doesn't really demonstrate a lot of EI or whatever, because you're not even aware of what's coming out. On the contrary, somebody also responds to it by saying, well, like what a lot of other people are facing during these challenging times, I was also retrenched because of COVID. So I have been on the lookout for good opportunities to come my way, and today this has landed me the good fortune of being in an interview session with you, right? So very composed, not complaining, very positive, very upbeat, very optimistic. So that's somebody who has got good EI, right? So the question was not an EI question, it was a very factual question, but in your response, you're demonstrating to someone who is aware of their emotions, in charge of their emotions, you're able to manage it, able to respond in a positive manner. So that's another way that you can actually demonstrate good EI, regardless of whether EI question is asked or not. Because it's very difficult to spot EI questions sometimes. So I wouldn't want to spend my whole interview looking at, is this an EI question? Right? So you just want to make it a habit that it should be a part of you to demonstrate good EI, to practice good EI, and that way even the interviewer knows that you're someone who's consistent, who's authentic, who is actually someone with good EI, right? Rather than you're not showing a lot of it, suddenly the EI question comes and then you show a very different shade and the character of itself. So that seems very engineered, that seems very constructed. So I think it's something that we should have throughout the whole interview process.
Well, I think that really makes a very big difference, the way they speak and all. And how should we avoid like common pitfalls that can convey lower EQ?
Sure, I think one of common traps is to become very self-indulging in an interview, right? Because obviously it's my interview, so I want to sell myself. So one of the common traps is that people become overbearingly self-indulgent, right? And that shows a lack of awareness towards your interviewer. You're not, everything is about you, my wins, how great I am, what my accomplishments are. The extra effort to link this back to why is this important to the organization? Why is this important to the job position that you're applying to? How is this going to benefit your teams? How is it going to benefit your company? How is it going to benefit your colleagues? If you're not translating those things back into what this means for everyone else, but it stays about you, then that's one of the biggest traps that I have noticed in interviews. That a lot of candidates come in and says, oh, I've graduated top of file and ranked from my university, I was a valedictorian, and I was also a sports person, and therefore I think I deserve this. I've also got all these great skills and capabilities. You're just sitting there and you're like, yeah, you're not communicating with me, right? You're just telling me your features, but you're not telling me what this means for me, and I am the person of importance here. So as an interviewee, you have to recognize that the most important person in the room is not you, it's the interviewer, because at the end of the day, you're trying to make this, or even not the interviewer, right? It's eventually going to be the manager that you're going to be reporting to, or the leader that you're going to be reporting to, and they usually join in the interview session. So you may not even be the interviewer, you may be the other person sitting in for the interview, because they are the ones who are going to pick eventually who they want in their team. So you have to recognize who's the beneficiary in this interview, right? I mean, to yourself it might be you, because I'm the one getting a job, I'm the one getting a pay, but that's not what they're hiring you for. They're hiring you because it means something to them, and that's what you need to understand in the interview process. That how are you pitching yourself in a way that makes sense for them to pick you over everybody else, and that's awareness as well, right? So I think that's one of the biggest traps that I have seen. Another common trap is language, right? A lot of times I find that interviewees are not assertive enough. So you do not want to be very aggressive, you do not want to be overpowering, but you do also want to make sure that you are not coming across as someone who is afraid of taking a stand. So language becomes very important here. So instead of saying things like, maybe, if, probably, I think, or at least in my opinion. So these are qualifying phrases which often interviewees find themselves using because they are very afraid of what if they don't agree with me, right? And that's okay, because as long as you're being honest with your answers, if they don't agree with you, then you're not going to be a good fit anyways. You always want to be a part of an organization where you're going to be aligned, you're going to be in sync, you're going to be a good fit. So take a stance, take a position and believe in it. I believe, I genuinely feel, or I observed in my view or based on my experience, right? So these are better terms to state because it's more assertive. They're more, they're not qualifying phrases. They're not if-y kind of phrases, right? So you're not saying maybe, if, I hope. So you want to be a bit careful in languaging, or be a bit more assertive in your languaging, so that again you show that kind of confidence that comes with someone who's aware of what their own strengths are, what their own potentials are, what their own beliefs are, right? And then how do you link this back to the organization's goals, organization's values, organization's philosophy? I think that's the important part over there. So these are two things I think are the most common traps that people fall into. Of course, there's a whole list, but I think if you can overcome these two for a start, that's already a big win.
Well, that's a very good tip.
Yeah.
And so this question we have now is linked to what you have mentioned previously.
Sure.
So we have been told to brag a little or to show off our abilities to the hiring manager, but there is more to just proving ourselves than just bragging, right? But too much bragging might tell the hiring manager that we are self-centered, or that we are arrogant, or that we care more about our personal gains, like what you said, than realizing the company goals. So, and I personally feel that it's often quite difficult to judge the correct ratio. So how do we then find the correct balance, or the perfect balance between confidence and humility?
Sure. So I think the balance is never between confidence and humility, because humility is not the opposite of confidence, right? So I think the balance is between confidence and overconfidence. Right? I think that's what we're trying to start, because a person can be humble and confident at the same time. So I would say let's go back into the very basic mindset shift. Am I here to really talk about myself, or am I here for value creation? A lot of times when we go for interviews, the idea is I'm here to sell, right? But if you were to look at a good sales process, even, it's never about selling, but it's about getting a customer to buy. And how do you get a customer to buy? Is by creating value propositions, right? So when you want to go into an interview, you do not want to just upsell your features, but you want to basically demonstrate what your value to the organization is. And that's where the shift happens, because then you're coming in from a perspective of how can I serve you, how can I help you, how can I make things better for you, how can I learn from you, how can I benefit from you. When you recognize the fact that you have as much to gain as you have to give, and you strike a balance there, I think that's where a bit of humility comes in, because you're recognizing, you're acknowledging the fact that, well, I also need to receive from you. So it's about being honest in that. For every 5 strengths you're demonstrating, or 10 strengths you're demonstrating, it's good to slip in 1 or 2 areas of where you think you can grow. Right? And organizations want to see that as well. That are you able to acknowledge the fact that there are areas of growth that you would like to focus on? For example, if I am going into let's say, for example, if I'm going to an organization today, I've been on the other side of the table. I've been a trainer, a speaker for the last 15 years. An organization comes to me and says, Rahul, can you help us to manage our L&D department for the next 3 years? We just need you to come in, shape things up, get the momentum going. It's a 3-year contract, can you help us? And I'm going in for an interview for that reason. I've never been on the other side of the table. I've never been in the high-risk position. I've never been in the in-house L&D position before. So it's a new area for me, right? So it'll be important for me to, while demonstrating that I am familiar with L&D processes, with frameworks, with templates, with systems, with the demands, with matrices that they use. While I'm aware of all of that, there might be things I may need to learn, right? So, for example, I may need to recognize the fact that I may need to do an additional certification in maybe HR, so that or HR business partner, so that I'm able to understand what the organization's in-house assessment needs are, something I've never done before. So if I'm able to recognize it and put that up front, as if I were to work with you, I'll need your support to send me for this kind of trainings so that I'm able to add even more value to you, right? Because I'm already bringing all this value, but this is something I don't have, right? So if one can acknowledge that, one can put that on the table up front, I think that goes to show that you're open to being authentic, you're open to being vulnerable. Two very important traits and qualities that we have in our world today, right? So if you're able to put that across, there's no way you're going to come across as intolerably overconfident, right? Because you're already demonstrating a good amount of humility in that sense of the way. Yeah.
How do you also get better at answering emotional intelligence questions?
Be real, right? I think firstly be aware, right? Always stop to ask yourself, what does this question really mean? What are they looking for in this question? Most people, they feel the temptation to reply straight away, immediately, right? Question comes in, I need to respond fast. If I don't respond fast enough, I risk people thinking I'm a slow thinker. Let's put that pressure aside, because I think any recruiter would rather have a good response than a quick response, right? If they can get both, great, but if it's either or, I think they'd rather have a good response. So if you don't have a response that is great right away, then pause. Think about the question first. What does this question mean? What are they trying to ask me through this question? How can I best frame this question, right? So a good thing to do is to have some form of a framework in mind when you're answering the questions. So an easy framework that we can apply, or an easy flow of response that we can apply, is this thing called the PREP framework: point, reason, example, point, right? So it's a very simple framework. State your position and state your point. That's the easy thing to do. Anytime an interview or anybody asks questions, we usually have a position or a point that comes to mind right away. So that's the easy part. The second part is the reasoning part, the R, right? Now the reasoning part is your because statement. This is my position, or this is the point I want to make because, and state your reason. And that's easy as well, because we often know why we are saying what we are saying. It can be based on our past experience, based on our beliefs, based on our values, based on what we know, based on what we don't know. So the belief, the reasoning part is also not too bad. Then comes the challenging part, which is the E part, the example part, or the evidence part. So this is where you're able to substantiate what you have said so far. What your position is, what your beliefs are, what your point is, what your reason is, and now backing that reasoning up with some more of evidence or example. So what can these evidence or examples look like? They can be statistics, they can be data, they can be research studies, they can be conversations, past conversations with people of influence. For example, you may have attended a forum before, you may have attended a seminar before, you may have attended a networking event before where you've come across a person of influence and they may have told you something, and recalling that conversation might be appropriate in this context, right? So you can recall past conversations, you can tell a story, you can tell an analogy, you can tell an anecdote, right? So this evidence or example can be any of this. It can be a case study, it can be something that's been in the news recently, so it can be any of those things. So it's important for us to be able to substantiate it. Now, one good story is good enough, one good analogy is good enough, but if you need to have more, you want to go more at length, I would say that giving up to 3 different examples for a point really entrenches your understanding of it. But take a look at what kind of question is this. This is a very loaded question. If it is, you may need to give 3 examples. Something very simple like what's your favorite color, you don't need to give 3 examples, right? So you also have to assess, like, to what extent do you want to elaborate unnecessary. The last part then would be to reiterate your point again, right? Or re-emphasize your point or your position again, because the last thing is what they're going to remember eventually. So you do want to reiterate your point, reiterate your position. You can do this by summarizing the points you've mentioned so far. You can do this by recapping some of the highlights of what you have shared. You can tell another story, right, in conclusion, that re-emphasizes your point. You can sell a vision, right? Or you can spell out the value that you think is existent within your response. So what's the value here, right? So you can do any of those things to reiterate your point one more time. So having a little framework, having a little template on how to go about responding to these questions makes you remain calm, makes you not go all over the place, keeps you in a logical flow, makes you come across confident, makes you come across composed, right? Helps you take care of your tonality, your expressions, and helps you to tick off what is left to be said. Right? I've stated my belief. I've not given my reason yet. Let's give my reason. I've given my reason. I've not given any examples. Let me give my examples. So you make sure that you have a more complete response there. Yeah.
Hi Aventis fam, from this session, we now know that emotional intelligence, that is the savviness to be in tune with your emotions and others, can help land you that dream job. According to the LinkedIn analysis, EQ is one of the most in-demand skills of 2020. And as workplaces ramp up their focus on employee mental health and positive company culture, they are looking to hire new additions who can enhance this mission. I also want our listeners to know that emotional intelligence interviews questions aren't designed to catch you out, make you feel dumb, or prevent you from securing the opportunity that you are after. They are actually great questions to use out of any context to help you develop your self-awareness for your emotional intelligence and uncover potential areas for personal and professional growth. And with that, thank you for tuning in to the 5th episode of Aventis Knows Season 4. If you do have any questions regarding the topic of emotional intelligence interviews, do drop down your questions in the comment section below or drop us a DM. We are available on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Telegram, as well as Spotify. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to us for more podcast episodes, and we will see you soon. Bye!